Hey everybody, Nomalangam Shali Moses here. I'm here with our personal finance expert, Dr. John Beckem. How are you doing today, Dr. Beckem?
I'm doing excellent. How are you doing, Noma?
I'm doing very good. I'm excited about this topic today, which is kind of falling in line with the series that we're doing, which is Before You Do. And today we're going to be discussing before you buy a home, the things that you need to think about before you buy a home. So I won't delay and just let you jump right in, and I'm listening and writing my notes.
All right. So there's a couple of things that we need to cover in dealing with the topic of what to do before you buy a home. And let me preface this by saying that many people can buy homes currently in their current financial or economic status,
Right.
but it tends to hurt people more than help them, you know. So if you already in a situation where you have bad credit or a lot of outstanding debt, or you have no emergency fund, you have really no funds to even buy a house or maintain a house, yeah, there might be someone who gives you a loan and approval for a home, but is going to be a high probability that it's at your demise. It's going to make your situation worse and not better.
Okay.
So let's start off with a couple of things that we should do before you buy a home. Number one, I would highly recommend that if you're buying it single, you know, as an individual, or if you're buying a home as a married couple, that you pull your credit report. You are entitled to an annual free credit report from the three main credit reporting agencies, which is TransUnion, Equifax, and the last one is
I can't remember it either. It's Equifax, TransUnion, but I'm sure we could look that up.
Experience. Yes, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experience. So
might be good that
your
you
credit
forgot them,
report.
because one of those had a breach recently, and I think maybe the one that you forgot.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, you can contact them. They have a 1-800 number. You can get your free credit report, or you can go online to their website and go through the same process to get your free credit report, and you can download it as a PDF and print it out. But you want to be able to go through your credit report and start to see is everything accurate? Do they have something on there that does not belong to you? You want it removed? Are they reporting a delinquency when you actually made the payment on time? You want to contact that and get that resolved. And so they also give you instructions how to dispute.
Right.
One of the things that's going to affect your ability to get a home, as well as how much home that you qualify for, is your debt to income ratio. You know, and it's basically looking at how much income you have coming out versus how much debt you have going out. And if you have more debt then I think it's 43%, then the likelihood of you getting a loan to qualify is slim to none. They want to make sure that the probability of you foreclosing on a home, not being able to pay it, is minimized because the bank is at risk. So that's one of the things that you want to do is get your credit in line. If you have some open credit cards, I suggest paying them off or getting them down as low as possible. Minimize your debt, because you're taking on a huge amount of debt if you're going to mortgage a home, as well as the maintenance and the upkeep that goes along with it. So number one, you want to make sure your credit is okay, improve it, make sure everything is accurate, because they're going to pull all three credit reports. And when they pull the three credit reports, they're going to take the middle number. So if they pull one credit report and say you have a score of 850, and they pull another one and you have a credit score of 750, and they pull another one and you have a credit score of 700, they're going to use the middle number. So they're going to drop off the highest credit score, they're going to drop off the lowest, and in that example, they're going to use 750. That's what they're going to determine what type of interest rate that you're going to qualify for, what interest is going to be on the loan.
Okay. So when you say,
that you want,
before you move on to the second thing, I have a quick question. When you say fix your credit or improve your credit, what, in your experience, would be the lowest possible score it would be wise to go into this process with?
If your credit score is below 700,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get hit pretty hard
Okay.
on the interest rate.
Okay.
All right. So right now it's November 2017,
17.
and the average interest rate, when I say average, is about 4.0%.
Mm-hmm.
So 4.0 is the average. Of course, you can find some higher. Might be able to find one around about 3.8, 3.85. But generally, right now, if you have good credit, you can expect to get an interest rate of about 4%.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Secondly, which is just as important as cleaning up your credit, making sure you don't have any delinquencies or outstanding balances, is the funds necessary. So I, number one, say make sure you have an emergency fund. Emergency fund, which is you're gonna hear me reiterate this over and over in several videos or audios, is 8 months of your gross salary. 8 months of your gross salary. And the reason why I say that, I know a lot of pundits out there say 3 to 6 months of your expenses. I say you need more than that, because if you look at in the last 5 years, even going back 3 years, 2 years, those individuals who have been unemployed on an average have been unemployed longer than 3 to 6 months. Unemployed as well as underemployed means that they might have lost a job that was paying them a higher salary or wages, and then they had to get a job that was paying a lower, just to get money coming in. So those people who are unemployed or underemployed have averaged anywhere between 8, 9 months, a year to 18 months.
Right.
So therefore, you want to prepare for that. Now, your emergency fund is totally separate than your savings that you're saving to buy a house. So I do not recommend individuals to take their emergency fund and buy a house with it. Because when you buy a house, if you have an emergency, say the hot water tank goes, or the furnace blows, or there's a leak in the roof, or the sewer backs up, or say your car goes, right? Then how do you maintain this new house and your current bills, and you have nothing for a rainy day or emergency? That's why emergency fund is vitally important.
Right. And if we're using this criteria, I think that we're going to find that a lot of people are buying houses when they really are not financially fit.
Absolutely. And like I said, and that's the reason why, and I'm going to talk more about this, is the reason why it usually turned out to be someone's demise or nightmare, or they're struggling. They always on the brink of foreclosure. They incur a lot of late fees, if you will, because they haven't properly planned. So I'm talking about strategically planning to buy a house, and what's going to put you in the best scenario and predicament to buy that home. All right.
Right.
So we talked about credit, making sure your credit report is up to par. We also talked about having an emergency fund. Now I want to talk about savings. Right. So right now, the average home, according to statistics in the U.S., is about $230,000. But for our example, we're just going to use 200,000. So maybe a person is able to get a higher value house at a lower price. So we're going to use 200,000. Now there are several programs out here. There are programs such as FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, which they guarantee the loan, and a person can put down as little as 3.5%. All right. There are some other programs out there as well, but most people are familiar with FHA or either conventional. FHA allows you to put down 3.5%, and the federal government guarantees that loan for the bank. In other words, if you default, don't make the payments, then the government will reimburse the mortgage company, the bank that made your mortgage, to make sure that they hold. Now, there are some other things that goes along with that, but I want to pause for a second.
Okay.
The other loan that most people are familiar with is called a conventional loan. Now, a conventional loan requires 20% down as a down payment. So you put down 20%, the mortgage company gives you a mortgage for the 80%.
Right.
All right. Now there are some substantial differences between the two. I start off with a conventional loan because it's the easiest. With
Right.
a conventional loan, when you're putting down 20%, you also have the ability to separate your insurance and your taxes from your loan payment. So a typical loan payment is going to have your principal and interest as your payment that you're going to repay. And in the conventional, you have the option to separate your taxes and insurance, and you can make those payments on your own without it being calculated into your mortgage.
Right.
On an FHA loan, you don't have that option. So if you're putting less than 20%, an FHA usually start around about 3.5%.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have your taxes and insurance placed in escrow. So that means at the closing table, you're going to have to pay 1 year of taxes up front.
Oh, wow.
And you're going to have to pay one year of your insurance premium up front. And the bank going to take that and put it into escrow for you,
Mm-hmm.
even though your mortgage payment is also going to include mortgage, principal, interest, plus insurance and taxes in that payment. So
Okay.
you're always paying, you've already paid 1 year in advance, but we're still going to have that money as part of your payment in case there's not enough to cover it. All
Right.
right. Another thing that happens when you do an FHA loan, when you put less than 20%, a mortgage company is going to take out an insurance policy, which is called PMI, primary mortgage insurance, which they're going to make you pay the premium. So not only do you have your principal and interest, you're going to have your taxes and insurance, but now you're going to have a PMI, primary mortgage insurance, added onto your mortgage payment. Now, the PMI is about 1%. So whatever your loan is, your $200,000 loan, you add 1% on top of that, and that is the fee for the PMI. Not only do you have a PMI fee, but because you are choosing FHA, there's a FHA fee, funding fee, which is 1.75% of the loan. So even though you're putting less money down, let's look at numbers. So
Also, it
on an
seems.
example, So on an example of a $200,000 loan, 3.5% is 7,000. So they actually come up with 7,000. Now, so that means if you take away $7,000 from 200, you think that what you have left as a mortgage or starting principal balance is 193,000, right? But that is incorrect. Because you have to add the 1.75% funding fee, and because you also have to add the 1% primary mortgage insurance, your outstanding balance begins at $198,341 on a $200,000 loan, even though you put down $7,000. So you automatically are working against yourself. Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand. Yes.
Okay. So if we look at the inverse of that, so let's even look at the $200,000 loan at a 4% interest rate, right? And before I go there, part of your savings also need to include your closing costs.
Right.
And so your closing costs is going to include your origination charges, and sometimes for FHA loan, they actually might charge you more money for origination costs. The origination cost is basically the fee that they charge you for doing all your paperwork and going underwriting. I've seen it as low as $400, and I've seen as much as $2,000 for a funding for origination charges, which also can be tacked on to the loan if you don't have that. Other things that you're going to have to pay for are your water and sewer charges up front if the current homeowner have already paid those in advance. Any taxes that they've already paid for, that's going to be prorated. You're also going to have to pay, your state taxes, your county taxes, as well as your lawyer fees. And you have to pay for your lawyer and the bank's attorney fees. You got to pay for both lawyers, as well as title work. So title insurance, they have the title work to make sure there's a clear title, and title insurance. So
Okay.
you're going to
So
have to
can
pay
I pause
for
for a second?
all of those. Yes,
Uh, So all of these fees that you're talking about apply to both kinds of loans, the FHA and the
absolutely.
conventional loan? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
those different things that you have to pay for as a part of closing costs have no bearing on whether you do an FHA or whether you do a conventional.
Right.
You know, now some programs that I have been aware of have taken closing costs and then put it on the back end of your mortgage, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that means that these costs, which are, fixed costs, now if you put them onto the back end of your loan, you just added 4% interest rate or whatever interest rate you qualify onto those closing costs.
Wow. Yeah.
Right, right. So it's like double the payment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on a $200,000 loan, you can approximate closing costs being around about $10,000.
Okay.
All right. So for that person who's coming in for FHA, you're looking at about $7,000 as a down payment plus about $10,000 for the closing costs. So you're looking at $17,000 as a down payment. And
Mm-hmm.
for those who are doing a conventional loan, which is 20% down, which that is $40,000 plus another $10,000 for closing costs, you're looking at about $50,000. All right. So that's a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is significant. Now on that $200,000 house that you put down $7,000, and with your funding fee and PMI fees, your mortgage turns out to be $947 just for the principal and interest. That does not include taxes and insurance. So $947.
And this is for how many years?
This is for a 30-year
A 30
loan.
year. Okay. 30-year loan.
Yep.
Okay.
30-year loan, just the principal and interest on putting down 3.5%, including the FHA funding fee and your PMI insurance. You're looking at a monthly payment of $947. And again, that does not include your taxes and insurance.
Right.
Now, when you put down a conventional loan of the 20%, so you're starting off with a loan of $160,000 that you're borrowing, that loan payment is $764.
Mm-hmm.
So we're right off the bat talking about a difference of almost $200 in payment, right?
Right.
Now, let's see, how does this affect you? So for a person who does the FHA route,
Mm-hmm.
for a 30-year mortgage at 4%, their total that they're going to pay for that house is $341,000,
Wow.
even though the house is only $200,000.
Right.
So you're looking at a difference of $141,000 just going towards interest.
Wow.
And on a conventional loan, when you put down 20%, you start off at on a $200,000 house where you finance $160,000. You're going to have a loan or payback of $275,000. So that's significant. You're looking at a difference of about $66,000 between the two loans.
So probably
Plus,
double.
your right. Plus, your payment is about $200 less.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to say, well, what have we done at a 10-year mark?
Mm-hmm.
So in 10 years on an FHA loan, you still owe $157,000. So you paid about $42,000 to your principal, and you paid $71,000 in interest.
Wow.
And that's just at the 10-year mark. And on a conventional loan at the 10-year mark, you still owe $126,000. So we're talking about a difference of what, $31,000. Your principal that you paid is $34,000, and the interest you paid is $57,000.
So I guess
So
the big question. Okay, I'll let you finish, and then I'll ask my question.
No, go ahead.
I guess the big question is, as a finance expert, a personal finance expert more specifically, if a person can only buy a house through FHA, do you feel like they should even buy a house?
My opinion and recommendation is no. I highly recommend that a person waits till they can do a conventional loan, 20%, and sometimes some people even put down more than 20%.
Mm-hmm.
Because why would you want to pay 1.75% in a funding fee, and then why would you want to tack on additional 1% for PMI. And it used to be where after you have gotten at least 20% in equity in the house, pay down your loan,
Mm-hmm.
you used to be able to write a letter to the mortgage company and say, hey, now that I've gotten 20% equity in my house, can you take away the PMI insurance, and can you also take away my taxes and insurance being part of my payment? Well, that's no longer the case because of all of the houses that happened in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12 that was foreclosed. Now PMI is for the life of the loan. So when you get PMI added onto your mortgage, at the beginning, you've got PMI for the whole 30 year of the loan or however long it takes you to pay it off. It's for the
Right.
life of the loan.
Right.
So part of your mortgage payment is this fee that does not reduce your principal at all. It just goes to an insurance company to say that, hey, in case you don't pay your mortgage, here's an insurance company that will pay off your mortgage for the bank, not for you.
Right. So my other question with regards to this is you mentioned a 30-year loan, and I already know just from, listening to your commentary and your expertise that you don't even recommend a 30-year loan. I've heard you recommend a 15-year loan. So
Right, yeah. So
can you speak
that's
to the
another thing that
difference
I
between those
recommend.
two?
Absolutely. So if we go back to my example of $160,000, because remember you bought a house that's $200,000, you put down 40 grand, so you mortgage $160,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so on a 30-year loan, even though you've only taken out 160,000, your repayment is almost $275,000.
Right.
So we're looking at a difference of $115,000 you're going to pay just in interest.
Mm-hmm.
And your payment, like I said, was $764. So if
Right.
you take that same $160,000 and you say, okay, I don't want a 30-year term, I want a 15-year term. Now, most of the time, when you go with a 15-year term, you can get a better interest rate. So instead of paying 4%, that's probably going to drop you down somewhere between 3.5% or less.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just go with 3.125, all right?
Right.
Because now you're going with a shorter term. You're going to get a better interest rate if you have good credit, and that's the caveat, you have good credit.
Right.
And you're going with a 15-year term. So now you borrow $160,000, and your repayment that you're going to pay in 15 years is $200,623. So you're only going to pay $40,600 in interest. Now
Mm-hmm.
your payment is going to be different, right? So your principal and interest is no longer going to be $764. It's actually going to be $1,100. But you can see how you're saving significantly on how much you're going to pay in interest, and you get a better interest rate. So
Right.
you got more things working. You have more things working for you.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So FHA is generally not a good decision. A conventional is better, and then between the 30 and the 15 is better. So I've also seen 20-year, and I think if you can have 15 and you can have 20, you could probably have 25, right?
Yeah, you can even have a 7-year. It's always dependent upon what institution that you utilize for your mortgage.
Right.
Most of the time you see a 30-year, you see a 15-year, you see a 7-year, or you see what they call these adjustable rate mortgages or ARMs.
Right.
I highly discourage anyone to take out a variable rate or ARM rate. Usually they lock you in or get you in on some very good rate introductory, and then just like the credit card, it just goes up. So you can go from making a $700 mortgage payment to now all of a sudden your mortgage payment is $1,200.
Right.
And again, that can have significant impact upon a family. You start
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what you have already as a family, kids, and so forth. That's huge.
Right.
Again, the
And what would
adjustable
be the
rate mortgages,
rationale
in
for
my
somebody
opinion,
doing that?
well, you have some people say, hey, I know I'm only going to be in this house for 5 years. So for 5 years, I want a interest rate only loan.
Okay.
Or somebody might say, hey, I want a lower interest rate for the first 5 years because I'm only going to be here for 5 years and then I'm out. Some
Mhm.
people might say, I want a 5-year loan that has a balloon payment at the end of 5 years.
Mhm.
And again, so what happens if life throws you a curveball, right?
Right.
So where you thought you was going to be out of that house in 5 years, say the market takes a sudden decline, and
Mhm.
now the house that you paid 200,000 is only worth 120,000. So
Mhm.
you're upside down in the house. Or say you lose your job, or say you have medical bills, or you have to take in an ailing parent, or something like that.
Mhm.
So say life as you planned it for the next 5 years changes. And
Right.
so now you at the mercy again of the mortgage company, which every single rule is going to be written in their benefit, not for you.
Right. 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 Got it. Okay.
And one thing I want to point out, remember how I told you on a 30-year mortgage for that $200,000 with 20% put down, which is a conventional loan, you
Mhm.
borrow 160,000 after making 10 years of payment, you still owe 126,000, right?
Right.
34,000 went to principal and 57,000 went to interest. But however, on a 15-year mortgage, and we're still looking at that 10 years where you borrowed $160,000,
Mhm.
well, at the end of 10 years, you only owe 62,800. That's a
Right.
huge difference.
It
So
is.
in 10 years, you've already paid off almost $100,000,
Right.
98 to be exact.
Right.
And $98,000 went towards your principal payment, and only 35,000 went towards your interest.
Okay. That sounds good.
Right.
Right.
Now you got to realize. So if I told you that your total payback is 200,000, and at the end of 10 years, if 35,000 went to your interest, then only 5 more thousand is going to your interest in the next 5 years.
Right. Right.
So you can see how it is very beneficial. It behooves a person to say, hey, even though I might want a house right now, it may not be the best thing for us financially. Am I going to hurt us financially or help us financially, right?
Right.
And I know you got some people out there to say, hey, you want to buy a house because it's a great asset. Let me
Mhm.
tell you this. A house just sitting there that's not making you any money is not an asset. What people are doing is they're speculating, saying that at the end of however many years, my house is going to be worth more money than I
Right.
paid for it.
Right.
Well, that's a pure speculation.
Mhm.
And I also question that, right? So if
Right.
you look at how much you put down on the house and how much you paid in interest and how much it costs you to maintain this house and how much it costs you for taxes and water and sewer and insurance, and you do the math, and say like you paid 200 grand for this house and you turn around and sell it for $210,000. If
Mhm.
you do all the math, have you really made a $10,000, advantage or $10,000 gain on this house?
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, if you do the math, and I can show this to you, the answer is going to be no, because most people are going to put more than $10,000 into their house that they're never going to get back out.
Right. So another argument that I hear is that, when you're renting, you're really giving money to somebody else when you could just be, keeping that money and putting it into your own house. So that, even if you are, spending on all these things that you've kind of broken down for us, and maybe in the end, you're really not gaining much. At the end of the day, though, if you rent for 30 years, you have nothing. But if you buy after 30 years, you have a house that you can then pass on to, your child if you have one, or something. You have something. What do you say to that?
Well, number one, who says anyone has to rent for 30 years, right?
Right.
um, renting for a specific amount of time may be beneficial for a family who's trying to save for a house, right? And they're
Right.
trying to do it the right way. So, and there's some advantages for renting. So, for a person who's renting, it, on a $200,000, just say your average insurance premium for that house might be $1,800, for 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And your taxes, and I'm just averaging taxes, might be $4,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at right there, that's $5,800 is going in taxes and insurance. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you rent a apartment, or a house for your family, you're not responsible for the taxes and insurance. You can apply for a renter's insurance, which
Right.
just usually cover your own personal content. And I've seen those anywhere from $100 to $300 for the whole entire year.
Right.
So, so even though you pay a rent and your rent can be whatever, neighborhood or type of house or apartment that you want, you don't pay for any maintenance. You're not paying for lawn care. You're not paying for removal of the snow. You're not paying for trash and recycling. You're not paying for your sewer and water. All of these costs come with the ownership of a home,
Right.
right? And so you might say, okay, hey, I'm going to have reduced costs while we have a purpose for saving for a home. So we're going to rent for the next 3, 4, 5 years while we save for a house because it's going to put us in a better situation. Or let me give you another example. There are several people that I personally know
Mm-hmm.
who had a house, they had a house for 30 years, whether it was paid off or not, that doesn't really matter. But now that they're older, right, they say, you know what, I'm grown tired of maintaining my house, making
Right.
sure that the roof is okay and the boiler is working and the furnace is working and paying for someone to come in and maintain my furnace. And if the stove go out, I got to replace the stove and the dishwasher. If there's a leak, I got to do all this. I got to shovel my snow and I cut my grass. So there are individuals who say, you know what? I'm ready to downsize. So
Right.
I want to be in a luxury apartment or a nice apartment and not to have to worry about doing anything other than paying somebody one check once a month. They don't
Mm-hmm.
they don't maintain anything. They're just getting rid of all of their property, school, county taxes, and it just also significantly lowered their insurance, right?
Right.
So there are many situations where renting can be beneficial for someone versus someone saying the American dream is home ownership. And I
Right.
say, that depends. There are a lot of people who rent and for good reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe all of a sudden they want to travel the world and they don't want to have to worry about anything, when they come back home. They want to be able to be gone for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time. Or maybe they're a snowbird and want to be able to, live in one part of the country, one part of the year, and somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's depending upon what your purpose, purpose for intended use. What are your goals and aspirations?
Right. I
Well,
think.
what if a couple just moved into a new area? Would you want to buy a house? You don't even know the area yet. So how do
Right.
you be able to differentiate what is a good area, what is a bad area? Maybe you don't have longevity in your job now. So even
Mm-hmm.
though a bank may approve you for a home based upon 2 years of income at this job, maybe you don't feel like this job you're going to be there long term. So why would you want to get a house based upon that income, right?
Right.
So because you're in a job and maybe not settled in a career. So there's a multiplicity of different reasons why someone may say owning a home right now for me is not the best case scenario.
Right. And the one caveat I think we have to always consider is, let's say owning a home with everything that's included, the taxes and the maintenance and everything was going to maybe land you at about 1,500 a month, and just renting with none of all those responsibilities was about 1,000. The key here would be that that extra 500 actually goes to your savings towards a home or towards some type of investment. Because if you're just there with that 1,000, right, and saving yourself that 500, but that 500 goes to, parties and things that, what's the word, disappear, and you don't have them tomorrow, then it really doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, so these are the things, the recap, before a person just go out and jump out and buy a home, especially because they got these different programs, 3.5% down. I've even seen some as high as 95% funding, right?
Mm-hmm.
95%, and all you got to do is, put 5% down. I've seen 100%, it depends on what's going on in the flavor of the month.
Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend against it because it doesn't help you financially. it actually puts you in the worst case scenario. If you begin to generate the mindset that that cash is king and
Mhm.
being debt free is actually more advantageous to my family than being burdened with debt, then you
Mhm.
begin to look at things differently, right?
Right.
Um, um, you know, I'm from and not everybody's there, but I'm from the school where, I pay cash for houses. If I want to be in that house, I don't want a mortgage. I
Mhm.
don't want to have to think about that. If something happens, in our family, then no one else has to worry about making that mortgage payment or fearful that someone coming. No one can take a home that you own that's paid
Right.
for.
Right.
So even though someone says, well, I own my own home, well, that's not true. If you're making payments to a mortgage company or a bank, you don't own that home.
The
That
bank
title
does.
says that the bank has lien on it. So they really owns it, right? And you're just, in any case scenario, you're still renting it. You might be doing a rent to own versus an apartment you're just renting to rent. But, until you can, have that house 100% paid for, you really don't own it. And when you think about those different things in that nature, um, it prohibits you from buying too much house that you really can't afford. You
Right.
know, there is a school that's going on right now that most people look at, or I shouldn't say most, a lot of people look at, or they ask the question, "What's my monthly payment?" So
Mhm.
they're only concerned about the monthly payment and not looking at the totality of what are you going to really pay someone else for this house,
Mhm.
or car or credit card or situation. And when you think about saying, and you have the mindset of saying, okay, I want to be debt free. I don't want to be encumbered or to debt. I don't want someone else holding this stranglehold on me. Then you begin to say, well, instead of looking at that $200,000 house right now, maybe we'll buy $150,000 house or a
Mhm.
$100,000 house. I buy more house or I buy less house that I can really afford because now I can pay this house off in 7 years, 15 years. And
Right.
then, once the house is paid off, we can look at other avenues. Or if I sell that house, I don't have to worry about paying off a mortgage first. I can just sell that house and all proceeds go to the next house, and you
Right.
continue your savings. Saving should not be for a goal. Saving should be a way of life.
Right, right. And also with buying less house than you need, once you've finished paying it off, then that would be a good time to reconsider if you need more house or if you're okay where you are.
Right.
Right.
And if you think about it, why do a lot of people want more house? They actually want more house to store more things,
More
right?
stuff,
So they
right.
want right, right. They want bigger closets or they want, bigger garage or basement or they got too much furniture. The furniture don't fit in the current space. So what they're really saying, think about this, and what I like to do is challenge people thinking. You're a person, and that mindset is saying, okay, I want to pay more heat, and I want to have more electricity. I want to have more taxes. I want to have more insurance, and I want to have a greater mortgage payment to house my stuff.
Right. I'm going to add to that stuff from a homemaker's perspective and say more to clean, more to organize, more to beautify, and on and on and on.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yes. Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
and I understand situations where you have a one bedroom or a two bedroom and you have more children, so therefore there's a need for more bedrooms and potentially more bathrooms.
Right.
But when your family situation hasn't changed, but you have accumulated more stuff and now you need more space to put your stuff in, you're paying to heat a bigger house just for your stuff. You're
Right.
paying more taxes for your stuff.
Right.
You're paying more insurance for your stuff, and your mortgage payment is greater for stuff. It's not for you; it's for things.
Right.
And so it might be the opportunity and time to say, okay, how can I downsize? If I
Hmm.
haven't really utilized these things in a year's time, then I might probably don't need it.
Right. I'm so glad you brought that up because I think people don't even take the time to think these things through. And you'd be amazed at how much we get influenced by just seeing other people with bigger houses, and then you think you want a bigger house, and you don't go through this thinking process of what it really means for your personal finance, the bigger picture of your personal finances.
Yeah, I've heard that term, trying to keep up with the
With the
Joneses.
Joneses, yeah.
So, right. You're trying to keep up with someone else who probably don't even care about you, don't like you, don't know you, and care less what you're doing in your own personal life, but yeah, you're trying to keep up, with the Joneses or some type of status quo.
Right.
I think everybody should do what's ever best for them and their family, and that should be the priority.
Absolutely. So the two main things, as the student who gets the front row seat is, basically you're going to want to work on your credit. And actually, I would add that at the Life After Debt Institute, you can go to teachable.com and then just look for the Life After Debt Institute, which is founded by Dr. Beckem. There's actually courses and segments and things like that that talk more in depth, and if they're not there, they will be there, that talk about fixing your credit report, overcoming debt, and all these other things. So when you talk about pull your credit report, you're going to get information about how to make it better, how to recover from debt, and increase your credit score. Then the other thing is, the second thing, or the major thing that you mentioned, was the funding. I've since learned that what is out there and what I call rhetoric in terms of what you need to buy a house is significantly, um, what they're saying is significantly less than what is actually what you need. And that's why a lot of people
Yeah.
have a crisis. Like we saw the crisis that happened around, I personally saw it, when people started losing their jobs and stuff, was between 2007, 8, 9, and all the way into 2010. And a lot of those
Uh-huh.
people had a crisis, and now that I'm learning more about personal finances from you and what it takes and all these other things, I'm seeing that those people were in a crisis probably because they didn't have 8 months of savings, not savings, of
Right.
the emergency fund. They
Emergency fund.
probably, right,
Right.
they probably had more house than they needed, so it created a catastrophe when they lost their job. I mean, there's so many things here that they couldn't sell their houses because the house lost value. So just these few things, if
Right.
you can listen to and
It it
educate
it it
yourself.
it, be, it, be, it becomes a downward spiral. So
Hmm.
so so let's take that same case scenario and say there's a couple that their housing, and when I say housing, I'm talking about mortgage, maintenance, taxes, insurance, everything is
Hmm.
only 30% of their net pay. So 30% of their take home pay, right?
Right.
So say you got this couple that's very wise, right? So
Hmm.
with 30% of their take home pay or less going to their house, it enabled them to say, okay, we're not house poor, right?
Hmm.
So they got money where they putting away for savings. They got money where they putting away for investing. And buying that home did not decrease how much money they was putting away for savings. So
Right.
let's say you got a couple who's putting away, I don't know, $1,000 a month, for a house, right? And
Hmm.
say they save up for that 20%, and they already got the emergency fund, and they buy the house. Even after they have the house, because they have bought it correctly, they're still contributing $1,000 a month to their savings. You
Right.
see what I mean?
Right. Yep. Yep.
So they're
Absolutely
still
makes sense.
contributing money to their savings. They're still contributing money to this investment. Why? Because if they decide, if something comes along where the economy takes a decline, well,
Hmm.
we already have savings. We already have emergency fund, right? So they can
Hmm.
pay off their house. They can pay cash for cars, right? Because they're saving pretty good. They have investments. Maybe they want to cash in their investments. Uh,
Right.
so when you're able to maintain your house or your living on 30% or less, you still have 10% or more going for savings. You might have another 10% or more going for investments. You
Hmm.
might have another 10% or more going for philanthropic endeavors, right? No
Hmm.
matter what the economy does, you can make proper adjustments, right?
Right.
I mean, even with your insurances, and I talked about this before, a lot of people are carrying somewhere between $0 to $500 deductible because they say if worst case scenario come, they can come up with $500. You know
Hmm.
why? Because most of them are living paycheck to paycheck or have less than 3 months of savings. But
Right.
when you have a healthy savings, you have a healthy emergency fund, you have healthy investments, you can say, okay, well, what's the highest deductible you have? They can say, well, our highest deductible is $2,000. Then a person can say, you know what? I'll take the $2,000 deductible because that's going to lower my insurance payment by 30%. So I'm paying
Mhm.
less money in premium with a higher deductible because if emergency comes up, I got savings. I got an emergency fund. I can make the $2,000 investments.
Right.
Now, if there's a car that you want to buy or need, you can say, okay, well, I don't have to worry about leasing a car then giving it back or making some astronomical payment on some car. I just go pay cash for a car. And
Right.
because I can pay cash for a car, I still can keep contributing to my savings, my investments, my philanthropic, as well as my housing, expenses that I need. So it puts you in a better scenario overall. So if the economy declines, if the housing market declines, if an emergency come up, you've got a personal financial blueprint from which you live by.
Right. So I'm going to take us maybe a little off topic, because I can imagine somebody listening to this and saying, well, look, the reality is a lot of people just live paycheck to paycheck. So even thinking about 8 months worth of savings is just maybe more than they can contain in their mind. So I have a few ideas, and I would invite you to kind of talk about other ideas. But I'll create a scenario here. You have maybe a single parent. Yep, because we have plenty of single parents, right? They're doing the best that they can. But honestly, I live in the Boston area, for instance, and the rents, the mortgages, everything, just housing in general is astronomical. It's crazy, right? So they're not being extravagant. They're just trying to have a roof over their head, and it costs a lot, right? You with me so far? And
I'm
then
there.
they have, maybe a child, maybe two or whatever it is. And, we're going to put aside whether or not they should have a child or whatever. We're not going to get into that conversation, but this is where they are, right? And they sincerely have this desire to start making good decisions and so on and so on. But the truth is, being by yourself and you have children, and there's other expenses and everything to keep you afloat, you have a job, you're only one person. How do you navigate this to the point where it's not like you're being extravagant? You really are doing your best to not be. In fact, you don't have a choice to be extravagant. You don't have a choice to go out of your way. You're not you don't have the $700 weave and the $5 coffee a day and eating out every week. Those habits, you don't have much to cut back. I have some ideas, but I'd like to hear what is your thought process for somebody like that.
Well, no matter what your income level, no matter what your income, whether it's at the low end or high end, you have to take a snapshot of where you're at currently,
Hmm.
and you have to do an assessment and say, okay, this is what I have coming in, and this is what I have going out.
Hmm.
And you begin by minimizing what's going out.
Right.
And for a person who has a lesser income, that
Hmm.
may take longer than someone else.
Right.
But you begin to start nipping at it little bit by little bit. How do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Right.
And so if that person who's at that lower income is in credit card debt, and your minimum payment is $20. Well, you might not be able to put $100 extra on it, but number one, stop charging, and then
Hmm.
number two, if your minimum payment is $20, try putting $25 on it, $30. You have to figure out where you're at and where you can improve, because one thing I can guarantee for you and to you, that if you do not change your behavior and your habits and your methodology for doing things,
Hmm.
your circumstance and situation will never change. It
Right.
may get worse,
Hmm.
but it's not going to get better,
Right.
right? So you got to say, okay, I have to do something differently. How do I begin? And if that beginning is $5, that's where you start. And so no matter, I, I help a lot of individuals financially come up with blueprint strategic plans. And I have yet, in all the 20 years that I've been doing this, I have yet come across a person where they couldn't find some income that they already had to help, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Even in the case where somebody might say, okay, I want to magnify this or make this more expedient. And they might go out and get a second job or a side job, or they might work overtime.
Mm-hmm.
They might go throughout their belongings and say, okay, what don't I need that I can actually sell? Whether they sell it on eBay, garage sale, home sale. You got to find out, what can I do to change my circumstance? And
Right.
until you recognize that your circumstance need to change and actually make a strategic plan and begin to implement that plan to change, then you're crying wolf to the
Right.
wind, and nobody's really listening.
Right. I see that. I think that on a very practical day in and day out, I was never a single parent, trying to make it work. But I remember being in graduate school, and I had always insisted that I wanted to live by myself. But what I ended up doing was I got together with one of my friends, and for the 2 years that I was in graduate school, we shared an apartment. So every bill that I had was slashed in half. But what that did for me was it relieved me of the pressure of, having to get a job and trying to balance an already rigorous program. But I knew that it was a 2-year plan, and I was able to still save even though I was in school and all this other stuff. So it was a temporary thing where I had to become uncomfortable for a while, because for me, living with somebody else that's not my husband and kids and so forth felt like an uncomfortable situation. But I went through that process and it worked. I was able to still kind of not spend more than what I should. And I got through those 2 years. And then after that, I was able to go back to, what I wanted and make a different plan. So that's what I mean when I say the day in and day out. And then to just, to reiterate what you're saying, is the person has to be willing to kind of change what they're doing, sometimes drastically, in order to recover. Because,
Absolutely.
yeah, because otherwise it's just going to be a problem forever.
Right. And a lot of people, or I should say a lot, some people, they want their circumstances to change, but they don't want to encumber their way of living by any means, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, you can always find ways to cut back. Instead of buying the Cheerios, buy the off-brand,
Hmm.
cereal. Instead of buying the Kraft cheese, you might get the store-bought brand. Instead of shopping at a higher-end grocery store, you might want to go to Walmart or a Price Chopper or a Price Right, or Aldi's. You can
Right.
always find ways. Instead of eating steak and potatoes every day, you might say, okay, well, we're only going to have meat in our house 2 days or 3 days out of the 7 days, because we're cutting back for a purpose, right?
Right.
If you have a vehicle, what vehicle takes gas, you might say, well, you know what? I'm not going to rip and run, every single day just burning gas. I'm going to go as needed. I'm going to limit
Hmm.
my movement of my vehicle to go to work and come back home. So
Hmm.
whereas you're filling your gas tank up every week, try to stretch it out to be every 2 weeks.
Right.
For women, I know women like to get their hair and nails done, but you might say, okay, well, I can't get my hair and nails done like I used to. I might do it myself, and that goes for guys too. Hey, I cut my own hair versus going to the barber shop.
Hmm.
Believe me, if you want to find a way to find extra income to pay down debt for the purpose of getting out of debt, you will find a way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think that it starts with just sitting down, being honest, and making that plan, and then working that plan.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. So
And like I said, I can't stress how many people can actually go in their personal belongings and find things that they can just sell. I mean, that can give you a boost of income immediately. You
hmm.
might be able to sell enough things to go ahead and pay off a credit card that's charging this astronomical daily compounding interest rate.
Right.
Instead of buying the name brand clothing and the name brand purses and shoes. Hey,
Hmm.
go shop at Walmart. Go to a secondhand store. Go to a consignment shop. Do what you have to do. It's only temporary to get out of your circumstances, so that once you begin to have your emergency fund, your savings, your investment, and all that, now you can buy what you want to buy because you
Right.
don't owe anybody anything.
Right. I just want to say what you said, because you cut off a little bit. You're talking about your emergency fund and your savings.
Yes. Oh,
You
I was saying that. Okay, I'm go ahead. Go ahead. Recap for me.
Oh no, I heard what you're saying, but you cut off. So I was just saying the two words that cut off.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's fine. So this is great information. Thank you again, Dr. Beckham. I just want to remind our audience where they can find you. You have a blog which is at your website where they could also find out about you. It's at drjohnbeckham.com, drjohnbeckham.com. And I might add that, you're very modest in telling us about yourself, but I will say that I do know about you that you're an actual real estate owner, investor, and have quite an impressive portfolio. And how many years is it now? 20 years of experience in this field?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I've been 20 years as an active investor,
Right.
and I invest in paper. I invest in commodities. I invest in equities. I invest in real estate. I try to always increase assets and minimize or eliminate liabilities.
Right.
That's the only way to build generational wealth.
Absolutely.
And when you do that, your capital begins to multiply. There's a thing that's called compounding interest, which I believe is the eighth wonder of the world, right?
Yes.
Uh, and it's going to work. So whether you do it or don't, you're involved in it. So
Right.
if you're doing it for yourself, that means your assets, your income, and your cash is compounding. If you're not doing it for yourself, then you're paying for someone else's, whether it's through credit cards, debt. Anytime you got debt, you're paying someone else to get wealthy.
Right.
So why not do it for yourself? And
So,
it takes a totally different mindset. You have to want to do these things. These things are not taught in your K through 12 system. They're not even taught in higher ed. So you have to
absolutely.
purposefully go out, seek the information, and then more importantly, apply it to your lives.
Absolutely. So drjohnbeckham.com, and again, you can go to teachable.com, where you'll find there's actually a series called Ask Dr. Beckham, which he has an audience obviously who ask him questions. I also field questions from my audience, and we do these segments, and for me, I can't believe that we get this information for free. So I'm going to write it out as long as I can. So that you can find at teachable.com, at the Life After Debt Institute. And then, of course, follow Dr. Beckham on Facebook. He's there as Dr. Beckham the second, and also on Twitter. Again, just look for Dr. John Beckham. I want to say thank you, Dr. Beckham. This is really good information, especially for those who are considering buying a house and those who really want to begin to change their habits and build their generational wealth and success.
And one more thing about that buying a house, which the bank is going to look at for underwriting, whatever funds that you have, they're going to want to be able to see those funds in your account over the past 3 months. So they're going to ask for 3 months of bank account statements, right? They're going to ask for a month's worth of check stubs. They're going to limit and actually not look favorably if you're just getting everything from a gift, right? I think even a
Right.
gifting is limited to I think $10,000. So these are also things that you want to keep in mind while you are applying for a mortgage if you're seeking funding, is to make sure that that every dollar amount that's above $100 that is either going into your accounts or leaving your accounts can be accountable for, because that's what the bank is required to do. They're going to report it to an IRS. They're going to ask for 3 years of tax returns. So you want to make sure your tax returns are actually done and they're up to date, because these are things that they're going to ask for. They want to look at where are you getting the income and how is it going out.
Okay, so that's really a third point. It's basically your history of what's going on with your finances.
Absolutely.
Right.
Because you got to realize that you're only putting, in the scenario I talk about a conventional loan, you're putting 20% down. So your risk is 20%. So the bank is risking 80%.
80, right.
So they have more skin in the game than you. So they want to do their due diligence to make sure, especially after our financial fiasco that happened in this country back in, '08, '09, and 2010,
Hmm.
they have much more stringent and regulations about what they can and cannot approve. So the more that you have this information, that you know, that you apply it, that you get your ducks in a row, you make your life a lot easier if you decide to apply for a home. And also, there is nothing wrong with saying, okay, I'm gonna find a house that maybe is a fixer upper, and we're gonna live in this house as well as we fix it up, right? So now
Hmm.
I can buy a house. Let's say, going back to my example, say this house is in a $200,000 neighborhood, and maybe because it has some neglected maintenance, or someone moved out of the house because of divorce or lost a job or whatever, you pick up the house for $100,000. And
Right.
again, you can look for these situations where you can pay cash or pay as close to cash as possible. Maybe instead of only putting 20% down, if you find a house in these situations, you could put 50, 60% down, and you say, you know what, I'm gonna live in this house while we fix it up. So I don't mind, fixing our floorboards when we come home from work, doing X, Y, and Z, having your friends come over, have a painting party or a fixing up party. So now you're building sweat equity. There is
Right.
nothing with finding different avenues to meet your family's financial goals.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Great information. Thank you so much, Dr. Beckham. We actually you know, have a solid 60-minute commentary here. So this is really good information for people who are really serious. Just one more time, Dr. Beckham, drjohnbeckham.com if you want to find out more about Dr. Beckham. Also, the reason why I keep saying that is because there's also a blog there which offers a lot of good information. So if you go to drjohnbeckham.com and you go to the blog, there's a lot of good content there. And I also mentioned the Life After Debt Institute, which is at teachable.com, and also follow on social media at Dr. John Beckham, which is both Facebook, Twitter, and also on YouTube. You can find many of these videos. So thank you guys, and thank you, Dr. Beckham.
My pleasure. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing all y'all in the next video.
All right. So we are out.